KTRS.
Hey, good afternoon.
Oh, wow. That is like music.
How do you do? It's the board meeting, and we're in session. It's this very soothing music because we get heated from time to time, so we like to bring the level down whenever we can. The board meeting is in session. John Deal, Speaker of the House in waiting, joins us via Skype. Good morning, John Deal.
Hey, good morning. How are you doing?
Jane Duker is here. She is an attorney here in town, also a former chief of staff to Governor Holden. Good morning, Jane Duker.
Good morning, everybody.
And you can give us an accurate traffic report from Highway 40?
Yeah, no, it was kind of goofy.
Oh, okay.
Post, like,
Goofy,
you know.
that's the official
Yeah,
traffic
well,
term.
it's a technical engineering term that I'd like to present, but it was post-rush hour goofy.
All right, and editorial page editor from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Tony Messenger. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning.
We wake up this morning.
Wow.
We wake up this morning to a story out of Arizona in which Arizona tried to execute a prisoner sitting on death row. It took 2.5 hours and over 600, I guess, convulsions until the person was finally dead. What are your thoughts as you watch this, John Deal? I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry. I meant Tony Messenger. We'll start with Tony.
It's really interesting that he's.
Yes.
We the last two shows John and I have been on, we've agreed like for 10 seconds, and now you're confusing
us. Now we're the
us.
same person. Oh
which,
my God.
I find to be very interesting. I think
Makes me laugh.
I think John's going to have a problem with it. This will be used in an ad against him at some point in his political future.
With the idea was that Tony would start the other conversation.
Okay.
So that was my mistake.
So,
Tony, go ahead.
So we all remember a couple of months ago something very similar happened in Oklahoma, in which a death penalty execution was botched, and what happened then is that the state of Oklahoma had no choice but to call for an investigation into how it happened and to stop executions briefly, at least for some period of time, while they try to figure out what happened. The same thing needs to happen in Arizona. And what's going on, and by the grace of God, it hasn't happened yet in Missouri, is that it's becoming harder and harder for states to figure out how to kill people constitutionally. And so they're trying these new mixes of various drugs, and they're keeping them secret from the public, and they don't even know if they're going to work, and they can't even find the proper medical personnel who will agree to do this because of ethical concerns within the medical profession. It's just another example of why this country needs a moratorium on the death penalty. Frankly, as I was reading the AP account this morning and another account that I read in The Guardian, this is almost what I think needs to happen in this country related to the death penalty. And ironically, we made fun of some Missouri lawmakers proposing this. We need to just go back to the public square hanging. We need to go to the public square hanging. We need to go to the firing squad. We need to make it what it really is, which is a barbaric act condoned by the state, and make it public, and the reaction by the public will be so incredible that will end the death penalty in this country. That's where we need to go.
John Deal.
Well, I think that's probably taking it a little bit too far. Number one, this is just a question of just probably utter incompetence. It shouldn't take 2.5 hours to put someone to death in a controlled environment. If it means going back to a firing squad, it means going back to a firing squad. It's almost comical in terms of how this played out. I think there was an Austin Powers movie at the beginning where Dr. Evil was trying to kill somebody, and it kept taking all this time for it to happen. And it's almost a little bit like that. But that being said, let's not forget why this person was being executed. This person was likely being executed for committing a heinous crime that had victims and had victims' families. And the death penalty system in this country needs some correcting. But it also needs correcting on both ends. Not only on this, also speeding up the process. Victims' families shouldn't have to go through 8 to 10 years or more of appeals after appeals after appeals. There ought to be a fair constitutional trial, a decision be made, and be and then whatever that decision made be carried out competently and swiftly.
Just some of the facts. This guy who was executed last night in Arizona killed a woman and the father, I think, in 1989, and has been on death row, and there's been no question about his guilt. So those are the facts of that case. Jane Duker.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that, eradicating the death penalty is the way to go. I mean, I support it, and I think in certain very limited circumstances it should be carried out. But these states need to get it together. And, if we're going to, I disagree that the line's going to go like Tony says. I think if you do public hangings, I think you're going to have like a Hunger Games style crazy world, and that's not what this was ever supposed to be. But
it's what it's become. It's what it is.
I don't think you can assume that.
No,
People are not calling for ending the death penalty. They're
a lot of people are calling for
but the
getting
same ones
rid of
who
the
always
death penalty.
have. The same ones who always have.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think there's a growing number of Republicans. There's a growing number of people who consider themselves truly pro-life who are talking about getting rid of the death penalty.
Maybe.
And there's a growing number of justice advocates who look at Missouri, for instance, where we just freed another man, Mark Woodworth, a couple of weeks ago, who had been accused of murder, who turns out, after many investigations, it's determined didn't do it. We just killed somebody a week ago who, up until their last breath, claimed that they were innocent. This is one of the reasons why we have to get rid of this barbaric death penalty, because we don't want to be using the American justice system to potentially kill innocent people.
Well,
Tony, the standard is not that when you have someone on death row who's being executed that proclaims his innocence as a reason to get rid of the death penalty.
No, that's not the standard. That's one of many reasons.
Well, but I mean, that's the example used. Woodworth was not on death row. He was accused of murder, okay? And the system worked, okay? And he was let out. These people, as McGraw pointed out, have been on death row. This person was on death row since 1989. 1989. Okay? That was before I went to law school 23 years ago.
God, you're old,
24,
John.
25 years ago.
But let's throw this out, though, because Illinois had about a 50-50 ratio of putting people on death row.
Well, Missouri doesn't, though. I mean, we've never.
But hold on a second. But this is now the second state that's had problems executing somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Illinois
just this year.
Illinois was 50-50 on people they sentenced to die, which is why they put a moratorium on the death penalty.
Well, that is a good reason to put a moratorium. If you're putting innocent people to death, but that's not what we're dealing with in Missouri.
I understand that, but my point is this, and I agree with Tony. I'm glad Tony finally sees it my way, and that is we don't trust the government to do anything except, fine, go ahead, execute guilty people in my name, but I don't want to see it. I want to see it. I want to be able to watch it. If I choose, I should be able to see what the government is doing in my name.
And you sitting in that room last night wouldn't have stopped or changed a thing. It needs to get cleaned up.
It
the
doesn't
process
matter.
is broken.
So, in other words, just because I can't fix, you're arguing against a closed government society.
No, I think
if the proposition is, is it more public and more visible with proper safeguards so children and whatnot can't necessarily go through it? I don't have an issue with that either. Okay, but that's a little different from the
town
lynch
square
mentality of a public hanging. I don't have an issue with more sunshine or disclosure on what happens or what doesn't happen in those situations. But I don't. Public hanging, I think, is probably a little extreme.
Yeah, because what would happen after public hanging is my solution would be implemented. There would be no more death penalty in this country. That's what would happen.
I disagree with that,
I
too,
disagree.
You think this country would rally behind public hanging and say, great, we killed some more people?
But I do think it would. I think there would be a sector of society. It would be Hunger Games. It would be
one of the relatives.
Really bad.
One of the relatives who watched the execution yesterday said, I didn't see him suffer.
Well,
he said. I mean, look. I mean, you have to bring up the other side.
Absolutely.
The AP reporter or whoever was the reporter said this happened. The other one, who was a family member, said, I watched a man go into convulsions, but I didn't hear him complain, so I don't think he suffered.
Well, I'm not sure medically he could have.
Well,
I mean,
that's the point. The point, though, is that I think to John Deal's point is that there's a whole other side to this, and that is the victims' families and so on and so
the
forth.
victim's family was very clear, saying it was 1/10 of the suffering that
Right.
that the victim suffered,
because it may have been a doctor or an administrator who botched a protocol doesn't mean you get rid of the system.
Exactly. You fix the problems, and if the drug cocktails aren't working, they need to find a different way to do it, and they should do it quickly and before they can continue to do it.
And keep in mind, part of the reason we're in this situation is not because there aren't doctors or companies in this country who will do it. It's parent companies of European countries that will not allow that stuff to be imported into this country.
That's John Deal, Tony Messenger, Jane Duker. The board meeting is in session here at Big 550.